Hello, this is Dennis with A1 Telephone, A1 Electronics, and today I want to show you a Briggs & Stratton carburetor. And so anyone familiar with Briggs & Stratton engines for lawnmowers and tillers and things will recognize this carburetor. And it has the push bulb for the priming of the carburetor to start the engine. And I have a lawnmower that I bought 10, 12, maybe a few years older than that off a guy who bought the lawnmower brand new, and he used it one season, and the back wheels are the large wheels, and they started wobbling all around. And this guy wasn't handy. He had money. He didn't feel like messing with it. And so he put the lawnmower up for sale, and I went by and took a look at it. And like he said, it was a brand new mower, basically. It had only been through one season, and he got it out the next season, and it was wobbling all around, and so he didn't want to mess with it. And he only wanted $35 for it, so I couldn't get the $35 out of my pocket quick enough. The first thing I did was I brought it home and I repaired the back wheels, and that took care of that issue. And for years and years, this lawnmower always started, was a very good lawnmower. I did a couple things to it through the years, maybe put a couple of coils on it, and that was it, and sharpened the blade a few times and cleaned the plug, things like that, just normal stuff. And it always started. It was very reliable. And then this year, the mower did not want to start. It turned out to be the carburetor, and it's not priming. So I took it all apart and I started looking everything over. And so I seen the design for the air cleaner housing where it meets up to the carburetor, and the air passage is supposed to go into the carburetor from the air box. And it's just a poor design. Whatever bright design team at Briggs & Stratton that came up with the design for the air passage flow into the carburetor from the housing of the air cleaner is probably not included in the end of the year bonus program. So once Briggs & Stratton found out they had a very serious problem, I'm sure they were excluded from any bonuses. So I researched the situation a little bit to see if anyone else was having a problem, and it was like an explosion of videos. Everybody and their brother is having problems with this issue. It doesn't seem like anybody really gets the problem resolved properly, and they just keep revolving around working with the housing and the gasket issue, and they're just going around in circles, and I'm not sure they ever really get it resolved. I mean, they're buying new housings, remade housings, all kinds of different gaskets. They're epoxying gaskets, gluing gaskets. Some of them are soaking them in oil. So there's a ton of different ways that they're trying to handle that, but it just keeps revolving around the housing and the gasket issue. And I don't want to get involved in that. I don't have time for that. And I already have the original carburetor converted. I already converted the carburetor that's on the lawnmower. This is some other carburetor I probably got through the years. Didn't even know I actually had the carburetor that's exactly like the one on the Briggs & Stratton mower that we're talking about. And so I figured I like how the conversion went, and it's been working for a couple of weeks. I haven't had any issues, and so I want to convert this carburetor. And I also want to show it on video because I didn't videotape the first conversion. But we're going to walk through the conversion, and you'll get some kind of idea about how that was completed. Now, you no longer have to worry about the housing and the gaskets any longer because you're not going to use that for an air passageway. Once the carburetor is converted, it doesn't matter whether you run an air box on it or not. You're not needing the original design to prime the carburetor. So we're going to get into that right now. What we did was I took a valve that you would air items up with, balls and things like that. And the hole is a little loose at 5/64. So we have our air valve, and we have a drill bit, same size, just a little loose in there. It's probably actually fits it, but it's 5/64 is what it is. And so we're going to set that aside. So we want to take a look at the carburetor, and this is the air passage. And we're no longer going to use that air passage. It's not needed. We're actually going to close that air passage off. If you look underneath the carburetor where the bowl would be, right here is a hole, and that's all tied into it. So I'm going to take the drill bit, and I'm going to put it in my drill, and we're going to drill inside this hole, and it's going to go out, say, like 11 o'clock. And it's going to come out of the carburetor somewhere in this area. So let's get that started. And they're not the best drill bits here, so we're going to speed that up a little. There's our hole. Take our drill bit out. Stick our drill bit through, and you'll see where our hole is right there. Now what we want to do is take a look at the air valve. And this air valve has a hole at the end, and it also has a hole just down from the end a little bit. And I roughed this area up with a file, and I put a bead of solder in there because I don't need that hole there any longer, which worked out really well, because once you have that bead of solder right on top of that hole, then what happens is when you insert it into the carburetor, what happens is that solder will stop it from traveling any further, and it also helps when we go to epoxy the needle valve into the carburetor. And then we're going to cut the needle valve off, because the remainder of the needle valve we're going to use to go into the priming bulb area. Okay, we're back now, and we've cleaned up the carburetor, and I went ahead and scratched up the surface area around the hole that we're going to put the needle valve into. We want to mix up the epoxy, but I also want to show that the red hardener is for like 24 hours or a day or so. So that's the slow type of epoxy for drying time. The yellow is a quick drying. So the red is the longer one, and the yellow is the quick drying. So I always use the yellow. I'm usually in a hurry. I got things to do, and so I use the quick 6-minute drying time. And you do want to let it cure a little while. But within a few minutes, you can start moving on with whatever you're working on and be assured that that's going to take a pretty good hold. You don't want to wrench on anything too quickly, but it dries quicker. And the black always comes with the yellow or with the red, and that's your resin. So we're going to mix that up real quick. Take a little bit of this. Actually, I'm going to end up with a lot more than I really need. So let's set that to the side. We want to get plenty of the hardener in there. So I'm probably going to end up with a lot more than I'm actually going to use. Set that aside. We'll mix this up real quick. Wipe off my tool. Now we have our bead of solder on our needle valve, and that's all been roughed up. So we want to go ahead and, like I said, it's easier to seat this tube into the hole with that little bit of solder because it stops it, and you can kind of get a feel for where you want to leave it. And I'm going to leave it just like that. Take a toothpick. Okay, we're back now, and I wanted to clean up the area around where the needle valve has been epoxied to the carburetor, and we're going to let that set up. So even though it's a quick drying epoxy, I don't want to really disturb it. But while we're letting that dry to a point where we can move on, which I'm not going to be using this carburetor. I already did this conversion to the carburetor that's original to the Briggs and Stratton motor, and that's on the mower being used right now. So basically, we're just going to do this part of the conversion, and then I'm going to do a final cleaning on this carburetor and set it to the side because it'll be ready if I ever need it. But while we're waiting for that epoxy to dry for the needle valve, we can move over here and take care of this air port that we have coming from the air channel and the housing of the air cleaner. So I can close that off now. I don't need it, and it won't be used, and I don't want, when I'm priming the carburetor, I don't want any kind of air escaping out of there. We want it to all go into the emulsion tube, or the tube that carries the gasoline into the carburetor when you're priming it. So we want to close that off now, and I'm going to go ahead and take a toothpick, and this is how I converted the other carburetor. We're just going to get this toothpick wet with some super glue. We want to go ahead and make sure our super glue is coming out. So now we're just going to take some super glue, and I'm going to spread it around on the, I don't want too much, but I want enough that's going to seal up the hole. And so we can come around here, because that's an angled hole. I'm just going to stick that in there real good. I'll take a Q-tip. I'm going to shave all this up and clean it off anyway after it dries. But that just gets some of the excess off of there. And we're just going to go ahead and let everything dry up now. Okay, we're back now. And while we're waiting for everything to dry and set up with the carburetor for the air valve and the toothpick, we removed the housing for the air cleaner. And we want to talk about that part of the conversion. Now, there's two little standoffs behind our primer bulb, and I went ahead and took the same drill bit, that 564, and went into where the air travels through and down the channel. So we went ahead and drilled into that. I also took a drill bit that's a little larger so that we could get the hose in through that little brace there, and that kind of helps hold everything. We went ahead and took the last part of the needle valve and epoxied it into that air channel for the priming bulb. And then we made that hole bigger so that the hose would slide down over the tube, but yet through this little brace. And so that was taken care of. We just have the hose kind of tucked in here. It's not going to anything because this end of the hose is going to go to the tube on the carburetor that we installed. And so then we went ahead and closed up this channel. I took a toothpick and super glued it into that little hole for the air travel. Okay, so that's been plugged up. So all of our air is going to come out of the tube, go down the hose, and over to our carburetor when everything's finished. And I went ahead and removed the standoff that was here for your old air passage because we don't need that any longer. It can be flat. So we sanded that off, and you can make any kind of gasket, or if you have a gasket, it can be used because you don't need that little hole in it any longer. It's not going to be used. So I'm just going to make a gasket. I already made it. I just don't have it on there right now. And it's just a plain old gasket. It doesn't do anything except for this hole and the two bolt holes. And it's just to keep a little bit of the dust out. Nothing, too major or nothing. It's just a gasket that I made. And so we'll put that back on the lawnmower, and we'll start the lawnmower after we prime it and show you that that original carburetor that's already been converted is working and the primer is working, and so we'll show that. So that's kind of how that part of the conversion went, and we wanted to show that so that there wasn't any confusion. We also did not go through the top because this is actually how the unit will sit, and there was too many brackets up here, so we went through the bottom, and that's why we chose this side of the priming housing. And so we went in through the bottom. And so now that we have explained that, we'll go ahead and take a short break, and we'll be right back. Okay, we're back now, and we've been waiting for the epoxy to set up a little bit, and the toothpick is already dry, I'm pretty sure. And so we can probably go ahead and cut both off. We're going to cut the valve off about a good ½ inch or so. We're going to leave sticking out. Because if we had another air cleaner housing, we would use the rest of the air valve tube to go ahead and go into our priming bulb area where our air passage is, like we showed a little bit earlier. We would just use that, but I don't have another housing, and so this one's already been converted, and we've used it for 2 or 3 times, cutting different things and cutting the yard and that. So it's all working out very well. And we're going to go ahead and take our Dremel, and I'm going to start it, and then we're going to cut that air tube off. We'll set the Dremel tool to the side. So we have some of the air valve left, and that's what we would use over here at the priming bulb area. We'll set that to the side. We don't need that any longer, but we're going to keep it. And I want to take the toothpick and I just want to trim it off. We have to do a final cleaning on this carburetor anyway, so we'll go ahead and smooth off the edge here of our air valve tube, and we'll just take and show what we have when we plug into the other carburetor. It'd be just like this one, and we just take our tube and plug it on. And since I was pretty careful about how I put the epoxy on, there is some epoxy that I pulled up with a Q-tip while it was still wet, and you can basically push that down onto that epoxy, which actually helps lock this tube in the our air tube down into the setting, and keeps it on there. Now on the top part, we took a little bit of super glue and just swiped it over the tube, and then put the I guess it's gas line for a weed whacker. It's the small stuff, and that held it on there really well. I didn't put too much on because I didn't want to clog the tube up, but I did want to keep the tube in place so that it didn't fall out through vibration. And you could do that here too, or you could put a little tiny miniature tie on it or something, but I haven't had any issues. It's been working out just fine, and that's what you have here in the conversion. So that kind of shows what went on in the process. And then basically, since this is the top of the housing and our carburetor would fit on, let's see, I guess it would fit on like this. And so that gives you a look at how it all comes together there. Move the light a little bit here. So that's the finished product there after the conversion, and it's really worked out very well. Now I don't have to deal with any of the gasket issues, or stick 2 or 3 gaskets on, or use any kind of sealer, or worry about getting another housing for the unit. None of that's used. So basically the only reason the housing is there is to hold the air filter now and the priming bulb, and that's it. You know, you don't have to worry about it anymore, and that solves the issue. And it worked out really well for us, and so that's the conversion, and that's what we did to resolve the issues that people are having with this type of carburetor, the Briggs and Stratton carburetor, that has all the issues with the gaskets and the priming and no start and all that other stuff going on. Okay, we're back now, and we have the air filter and housing back on the original carburetor that was converted a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to go ahead and prime the unit and start it and check out the lawnmower. So we'll go ahead and prime it. We'll start it. Now that we know that the lawnmower is working, we can go ahead and take a short break, and we'll be right back. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.